The 14th of July, 1920. Bastille Day. A warm, sun-filled morning in Paris. The kind of morning where the light comes off the Seine at a particular angle and turns everything it touches to gold. 2 years ago, the Great War finally ended. 4 years of a conflict so vast, so devastating, so unlike anything the world had seen before, that people struggled to find words for it. 17 million dead. An entire generation of young men gone from the villages and cities of Europe, from the streets of this very city, the mud of the Somme, the silence of Verdun. Paris carries that weight. You can feel it if you know where to look. In the women who still wear black, in the photographs on the mantelpieces, in the way certain men walk, those who came back changed, carrying something they don't speak about. The city has not forgotten. It will never fully forget. And yet, Paris is also, against everything, alive. Defiantly, tenderly, stubbornly alive. The markets are open. The cafes are full. There is bread in the boulangeries, cheese on the market stalls, music drifting from windows left open to the summer air. People are falling in love. Children are running through fountains. Artists are filling their canvases with light. This is what cities do in the end. They endure, they heal, they open their doors in the morning and put the bread in the window and let life begin again. Today, this warm July day in 1920, is one of those days. A day when Paris is simply, beautifully, itself. We'd like to take you there, a journey through time, to a single afternoon in one of the most extraordinary cities that has ever existed. Not to the Paris of legends or monuments, but to the Paris of ordinary people, living their ordinary, irreplaceable lives. But first, welcome to Softer Worlds, a place where history slows down, where the noise of the present fades, and where we take you somewhere quieter, somewhere older, somewhere you have never been, but that somehow feels like home. You are standing at the edge of a street market on the Rue Mouffetard, one of the oldest market streets in Paris, curving gently downhill, like a sentence that hasn't quite finished saying what it means. The morning has recently decided to become afternoon. The bells of the Saint-Médard Church, just there at the bottom of the hill, do you hear them? Have already rung 12 times and gone quiet again. But the market doesn't care about clocks. The market has its own rhythms, its own particular sense of when things should begin and end. And right now, it is very much in the middle of being alive. Let me describe it for you. The street is narrow, narrower than you might expect. 2 people walking abreast can nearly reach both walls of the buildings if they stretch their arms. But that narrowness is part of it, part of the intimacy of the thing. The buildings lean in on both sides, like elders listening to a story. Their stone faces are the warm gray of old silver, streaked here and there with the particular rust color that Paris gets from centuries of rain and iron and time. At street level, the stalls begin, not in any orderly fashion. This is not a market that has been arranged. It has simply happened. The way markets have always happened in cities like this. The way life accumulates in the gaps between things. A fruit seller has set up beside a woman selling dried herbs. Beyond her, a man in a heavy wool coat is offering cheeses. Great wheels and wedges of them. Stacked on a plank of wood, he's balanced across 2 crates. Beside him, almost touching, a young girl sits with a basket of eggs, each one wrapped in a scrap of straw. The colors are extraordinary. Autumn has arrived in Paris. which means the market has taken on its autumn colors, the deep burgundy of late beets, the amber of pears, the forest green of cabbages, so fresh, their outer leaves are still beaded with this morning's water. Bundles of dried lavender hang from an awning overhead, their purple gone slightly silver with age, their scent mixing with the smell of the street, which is to say, the smell of bread and stone and horses and something faintly smoky from a brazier somewhere nearby where a man is roasting chestnuts. You can smell the chestnuts from here if you breathe in slowly. You are not shopping today. You have no list, no basket, no particular errand. You are simply here, present, unhurried, belonging to no one and nothing. A pair of eyes, a pair of ears, a quiet warmth moving through the world. This is enough. More than enough. Let's walk. The first man you notice properly is the cheese seller. He is perhaps 60, perhaps 65. It is difficult to say, because men who have spent their lives outdoors develop a quality of face that is simultaneously ancient and timeless. He has a thick mustache the color of old straw, and he wears his age the way a good coat wears its years, with dignity and a certain accumulated richness. His name, though you will not learn it today, is Maurice. He has been selling cheese on this street for 23 years. He knows his customers by their orders. The widow on the third floor of number 47, who always takes a small triangle of brie and no more. The philosophy student who buys nothing but aged Comté, and once asked Maurice whether he thought cheese was, in some philosophical sense, the same cheese it had been before aging, or something entirely new. Maurice had thought about this for a moment and said that he didn't know about philosophy, but that the cheese was considerably better, and that might be the more important question. He is not a talkative man, but his hands are extraordinarily deft. He cuts without looking, portions by feel, wraps in paper with 3 precise movements that have become so practiced they seem like a kind of music. You watch him serve a woman in a dark coat. She points, he nods, he cuts. The knife makes a clean sound against the wood. She pays from a small purse. Coins counted out carefully, returned carefully. And then she is gone, the cheese tucked under her arm, and Maurice is already looking at the next person with the same patient, slightly distant expression. There is something enormously comforting about a person who knows their work so completely that they no longer have to think about it. A little further down, past a man selling onions, braided together in long golden ropes that swing from the awning like decorations, you find the fruit stall. The woman running it is younger, perhaps 30, with dark hair escaping from beneath a scarf and an expression of comprehensive, cheerful indifference to the cold. She is talking to another woman, her voice rapid and musical in a way that suggests the south of France somewhere in her childhood, some warmer place that still lives in the back of her throat. Her fruit is laid out with a kind of unconscious artistry. The large pears in a gentle curve along one edge, late peaches, nearly the last of the season, clustered at the front, apples sorted by color into rough groupings that form a gradient from pale yellow to deep red. She didn't plan this. It's simply how she arranged them this morning, the way she always arranges them, guided by some private sense of order that never needed to be taught. A small boy, hers, a neighbor's, it's impossible to say, is sitting on a crate beside her, eating an apple with total focus, his small legs not quite reaching the ground. Swinging gently, he notices you looking at him. He looks back with the frank, unembarrassed curiosity that only children and cats can carry off with any dignity. Then, he goes back to the apple. You continue walking. The market closes around you like water. You are inside it now, fully arrived, part of its texture. People move past you in both directions, some carrying baskets already full, some empty and expectant. You hear fragments of conversation, a complaint about the price of flour, a piece of gossip about someone's cousin, a question about whether the rabbit will be fresh on Thursday. None of it concerns you. All of it delights you. This is the great gift of being a stranger in a place you love. Nothing is required of you except attention. You are released from history, from obligation, from the thousand small demands of your ordinary life. You are simply here, and the world is simply happening. And this present moment on a cobblestone street in Paris in the autumn of 1923 is more than enough to fill a person entirely. You leave the main run of stalls, not intentionally, just because a gap opened between two tables and your feet took you through it, and you find yourself in a narrow side street that bends slightly to the left. The street is nearly empty here. A cat sits on a window ledge, 3 floors up, watching nothing in particular, with the focused disinterest of its kind. Somewhere above, someone is playing the piano, softly, hesitantly, as though they are working something out rather than performing it. A piece you don't recognize, but which feels familiar in the way that all music eventually begins to feel familiar once you stop needing to identify it. In there, at the corner, where the street bends back toward something resembling a main road, is a café. Of course, there is a café. There is always a café. This one is called Le Renard Gris, the gray fox. The windows are fogged from the warmth inside. 2 small tables sit on the pavement outside, though only one is occupied. An elderly man in a dark suit is sitting with a newspaper folded to a specific section, reading with the total absorption of someone who has nowhere else to be and is entirely at peace with this fact. You go inside. The interior of Le Renard Gris is small and slightly dim and smells wonderfully of coffee and tobacco and the particular warm bread smell that comes from a kitchen somewhere at the back. There are perhaps 8 tables. Half of them are occupied. The walls are a deep brownish yellow, not painted this color intentionally, but arrived at over decades of tobacco smoke and lamplight and the patient accumulation of afternoons. Behind the counter stands a man who can only be the proprietor, heavy-set, with a magnificent belly that speaks to a long and satisfying relationship with his own kitchen, a thick, dark apron, and an expression of benevolent authority. He sees you come in and gives a brief nod that manages to convey welcome, acknowledgement, and the expectation that you will sit down and decide what you want without making a fuss about it. You sit, a corner table near the window. The seat is padded in worn red velvet, the kind of worn that is soft rather than tattered. From here you can see both the room and the street through the fogged glass. A satisfying view in both directions. A young woman appears. She is perhaps 18, with her hair pinned up in the manner of the decade. That particular loosely formal arrangement that manages to look both casual and considered. She has ink on her right index finger that she hasn't noticed yet, and she carries her little notebook with a kind of unconscious authority. that suggests she has been working this room long enough to have developed opinions about people before they've said a word. She looks at you, waits. Un café, you say. S'il vous plaît. She writes it down anyway, though it can't have been necessary, and disappears. While you wait, you listen. Two men at the table beside you are having what sounds like an argument, though you realize after a moment that this is simply how they talk. They are both somewhere in their 40s, wearing the slightly shabby elegant clothes that suggest artists or writers, or at least people who spend a good deal of time thinking about things that don't pay particularly well. One of them has a sketch pad open on the table. The other is talking, fast, gesturing, about something you can catch only in pieces. A show at a gallery, a painter whose name you don't recognize, a disagreement about whether the work has heart or merely technique. The man with the sketch pad listens, nods, occasionally makes a small mark with his pencil. He is the quieter of the two, which may be why his friend does most of the talking. Or it may be the other way around. The quiet one is perhaps the one who thinks more, and the talking is what the other man does instead of thinking. You can't be sure. People are mysterious, even here, especially here. The coffee arrives. It comes in a small white cup on a white saucer with a single cube of sugar on the side and a small glass of water beside it that you didn't ask for and didn't need to. This is simply how coffee arrives in a good Parisian cafe, with everything it requires and nothing more. You wrap both hands around the cup. It is warm. Of course it is warm. But the warmth after October air feels specific, feels earned, feels like a gift. You drink. The coffee is strong and slightly bitter and perfect, the kind of perfect that requires no adjustment, no improvement. You sit with it and let the noise of the cafe settle around you. The voices, the clinking, the occasional burst of laughter from the table near the door, where three women are having a conversation that seems, from the outside, to involve a great deal of shared history and a great deal of delight in that history. Outside, through the fogged window, Paris continues. When you finally step back outside, the afternoon has shifted. The light, that extraordinary Parisian light that painters have been trying to capture and explain for 2 centuries, has moved. It comes now from a lower angle, throwing long shadows down the length of the street, turning the cobblestones from gray to a kind of warm ochre. The air is colder than before, not unpleasantly cold, but decisively, the kind of cold that reminds you that winter is coming, that the world has its own schedule, that October does not wait for anyone's permission. You turn left, not because you know where left goes, but because your feet decide it first, and your mind agrees a moment later. This is, you suspect, the best way to navigate a city like Paris. Not with a map, not with a destination, but with a general willingness to see what's there. The street you're on now is quieter than the market street. Residential, mostly, with ground floor shops that have the look of places that have been there for a very long time and intend to remain. A pharmacy with its green cross sign, a small épicerie with its door open, and a smell of coffee and cured meat coming out. A cobbler's shop where the cobbler himself, elderly, bespectacled, wearing a leather apron, can be seen through the window, working at a shoe with an expression of total concentration. There is something about watching a person do something well, something they have done 10,000 times, something their body knows completely, that is both calming and quietly moving. The cobbler is not thinking about his hands. His hands are simply doing what they know, and his face, freed from that particular attention, has settled into its natural expression, which turns out to be one of mild contentment. Not happiness exactly, contentment, a more durable thing. You pass a doorway where two old men are standing and talking. They are both using their hands extensively in the French manner, not as illustration of the words, but almost as words themselves, a second language running alongside the first. Their conversation seems heated, but they are smiling. They have probably been arguing about the same things for 40 years and have settled into a kind of loving disagreement that neither of them would surrender for anything. A woman leans from a high window to retrieve a pot from a window box. Late geraniums, still red, a surprise. She sees you looking up, doesn't seem annoyed by it, goes back inside. A dog of indeterminate breed trots past with great purpose, as though late for something important, and disappears around a corner. Paris, you understand, is not one city, but many thousands of individual moments that happen to share an address. The Jardin du Luxembourg announces itself before you see it. There is a quality to the air near large parks, a softening, a slight dropping of the urban temperature, a smell of earth and leaves that doesn't belong to the city proper, but seeps in anyway, generously. You follow it, and then the gates, and then the gravel paths, and then the gardens opening before you like a page turning. The Luxembourg in October is extraordinary. The chestnut trees that line the main alleys have gone fully golden. Not the pale tentative gold of September, but the deep, saturated gold of a month that knows its ending. Some of the leaves are still on the trees, trembling in the light breeze. Some have fallen to the gravel in drifts, and the children who are playing at the edges of the paths run through these drifts deliberately, for the sound, for the sensation, for the pure pleasure of disturbing something orderly. The central octagonal basin reflects the sky, gray-blue, streaked with cloud, contained within its stone border. A small sailboat, attended by a boy of about 7, who runs alongside it with a long pole, moves across the water with an improbable dignity. You find a chair. The park provides chairs, green iron chairs, that can be moved and rearranged as the visitor sees fit, a democratic and sensible arrangement that says something admirable about Paris's understanding of how people should be allowed to occupy public space. You drag yours to a position that gives you a view of the basin and a chestnut tree and a section of gravel path busy with the afternoon's pedestrians. Then you sit and you do nothing but look. The people of Paris in an October afternoon. A nanny in a dark uniform pushes a perambulator along the gravel with the measured pace of someone who has spent a great deal of time moving at someone else's speed. The baby within is invisible, swaddled and canopied, but the nanny speaks to it occasionally in a low, reassuring voice, as though describing the trees, the sky, the passing world. 2 young men walk together, close but not touching, talking with the intensity of people who have recently discovered ideas and are still slightly shocked by their own thoughts. One of them, the one with the notebook tucked under his arm, speaks in the faster, more anxious rhythm of someone presenting an argument. The other listens with a focus that is itself a kind of compliment. An older woman sits 3 chairs away from you, reading. She has positioned herself so the light falls from the left, and she holds her book at a very specific angle, and she turns pages with the ease of someone for whom reading is as natural and unconsidered as breathing. She has brought her own biscuits in a small paper bag. Every few minutes, she takes one and eats it without looking at it, without pausing in her reading, the way you'd eat if eating were merely a background process and reading were the real thing. You find you like her enormously. This woman you will never know. A gust of wind comes through the trees. The golden leaves move. Several let go, spinning slowly down through the still air, in the particular unhurried way of leaves that are falling for the very first time and have not yet learned to hurry. One of them lands on the arm of your chair, a chestnut leaf, 5-lobed, golden at the center, brown at the tips. You look at it for a moment. You don't move it. It stays there, resting, until the next small breeze takes it on. You watch it go. Let me tell you about some of the people you might have passed today, on the streets and in the cafes and in the corridors between. Not characters in a story, exactly. Not people with plots, just people living their Tuesday. There is Celeste, who is 26 and works in a hat shop on the Rue de Rivoli and has been to the cinema 11 times this year already. She is not especially interested in cinema, but she is very interested in the cool darkness of the theater and the feeling of sitting in a crowd while being entirely alone. This afternoon is her half day. She has been to the market and bought mushrooms and a small bunch of parsley and 1 apple, which she ate on the way home. She is thinking about a letter she hasn't written yet. There is Edouard, who is 51 and teaches Latin at a lycée and is possibly the most contented man in Paris, a fact he doesn't fully recognize because contentment is that kind of thing. You are most inside it when you are least aware of its presence. He has his constitutional every afternoon at 2, rain or shine, through the same streets in the same order, and he notices something small and new every time, a change in the light, a plant growing from a crack in a wall, the way a shadow falls differently in October than it does in September. He has been doing this for 20 years and has yet to find the walk boring. There is Mireille, who is 17 and is almost certainly late for something, and whose hat, a bright blue thing, rakishly tilted, very modern, has been an ongoing source of argument between herself and her mother since she brought it home from the market 3 weeks ago. She is walking very fast in the way of someone who has made the calculation that walking very fast is marginally better than running and considerably better than arriving on time and having nothing to complain about. There is an American, you can tell by the coat, by the slight unself-consciousness of the way he stands, the way Americans stand in Paris, slightly too openly, as though they haven't yet learned to fold themselves into the city's particular grammar. He is standing outside a bookshop, reading the titles in the window. He has been in Paris for 6 months. He is, without entirely knowing it yet, falling in love with the city in the way that people of a certain sensibility always fall in love with Paris. Not dramatically, not all at once, but steadily and without remedy, the way water wears stone. There is a grandmother. You see her at the edge of the market on your way back, who has finished her shopping and is standing with her bags, not ready to go home yet, watching the market, with an expression that you understand immediately. She has been coming to this market for 40 years. She knows everyone, and everyone knows her. But right now, she isn't speaking to anyone. She is just looking. She is just here. She is, in this moment, doing exactly what you are doing. She would understand you completely. This woman. If you had words in common, you would have everything in common. The bells of Saint-Médard ring again. 4 o'clock. You count them without meaning to. 1, 2, 3, 4. Then silence. The particular silence that follows bells. The silence that is shaped by the sound that came before it. A silence that feels somehow larger than ordinary silence. The afternoon is beginning its slow tilt toward evening. Not yet, not for a while, but you can feel the suggestion of it in the temperature, which has dropped another degree or two since you sat down in the park, in the light, which has gone from gold to a kind of amber, in the way the crowd on the market street has thinned slightly. The serious shoppers done now and gone home, leaving behind the people who are here for the pleasure of it, rather than the purpose. This is the best time to be at a market, you find. The late afternoon, when the urgency has dissolved, when the sellers are beginning to think about packing up and are therefore a little more relaxed, a little more willing to talk, when the light is doing something extraordinary to the remaining fruit and vegetables, turning the oranges luminous, making the cheeses glow, and when the whole long market street has settled into a kind of golden ease that feels almost like a reward for having paid attention all day. You walk back through it slowly. The cheese seller, Maurice, though you don't know his name, is beginning to cover his displays with a cloth. He sees you pass and gives a nod, the same brief nod he gives everyone, the nod that is simply an acknowledgement of shared presence, shared city, shared afternoon. The fruit seller's boy has been collected by someone, an older sister, perhaps, and the stall looks slightly less full of life without him, though the fruit is still beautiful. A man is sweeping the stretch of cobblestone in front of his vegetable stall with a wide-headed broom, pushing leaves and scraps into a pile at the gutter with methodical satisfaction. The sweeping sounds like its own kind of music. Near the top of the market street, where it broadens slightly before giving way to a more ordinary-looking road, 2 women are talking. They are standing beside a stall that sells fabric, lengths of cloth in various weights and colors draped over a frame. And they are talking in the completely absorbed way of old friends who haven't seen each other in some time and are catching up with an intensity that makes the fabric stall almost incidental to the encounter. You don't intend to listen. You're simply walking past, but you catch pieces, something about a neighbor, something about a journey that was planned and then not taken, something about a child, a grandchild, who has apparently done something either delightful or alarming. It's difficult to be sure from tone alone, because the tones keep shifting, warm, and then worried, and then warm again. One of the women is tall, with a long face and an expression of interested sympathy. She listens more than she speaks. The other is shorter, rounder, and has the gift of being fully animated by everything she says, her face moving through weather-like changes of expression as she speaks, as though her feelings are too immediate to be contained. They have known each other since they were girls, in some other town, a smaller town, somewhere provincial with church spires and a different quality of light. Paris has been their city for 20 years, 30 perhaps, but sometimes, at moments like this, when they see each other suddenly on a familiar street, they are briefly girls again in that smaller town, and the city is just something that happened to them later. You don't know any of this for certain, but you sense it in the way they stand, in the way the taller one reaches out and briefly touches the other's arm when the expression shifts again to something that might be sadness, and the way the touch is received, not with surprise, but with a deep, old familiarity. You carry on walking, but the image stays with you. Two women, a fabric stall, a late October afternoon, 30 years of friendship contained in a quarter-hour conversation. There is something about it that moves you, and you can't entirely say why. You are hungry, not urgently, not uncomfortably, just the pleasant background hunger of someone who has spent several hours walking in October air, the kind of hunger that knows exactly what it wants. What it wants is bread. A boulangerie presents itself on a side street, as though it heard you thinking. The door is open. The smell that comes out of it is one of the fundamental good smells of the world. Not just bread, but warm bread, fresh bread, bread that is still in the full knowledge of its recent existence in an oven, bread that has not yet had time to become merely ordinary. Inside, behind a glass case, a young woman in a white apron is arranging baguettes in a basket. She looks up when you enter, and her expression is that particular expression of people who work in good bakeries. A quiet, professional warmth. The expression of someone who knows that what they are selling is a small daily happiness for most of the people who come in, and has made their peace with being responsible for that. You buy a demi-baguette, half a baguette, still warm, wrapped loosely in paper. You eat the end of it on the street because you cannot help it, because bread this fresh on an October afternoon in Paris is not something that can be reasonably deferred. It is, as you expected, perfect. The crust cracks. The inside is soft and slightly chewy and has that particular flavor, yeasty, wheaten, warm, that is really less about ingredients than about time and attention, and the specific temperature of a Paris afternoon in your mouth. You walk and eat, and the city moves around you. And this, you think, is one of the pure pleasures. Not a complicated pleasure. Not a pleasure that requires explanation or justification or any particular context. Just bread and a street and an afternoon. There is a window on the upper floor of a building at the corner of the Rue Mouffetard, and a narrower street whose name you don't catch. And in that window, clearly visible from the pavement below, a woman is painting. You see her only in profile. She is perhaps 35, with her hair tied back loosely, wearing a smock that has been comprehensively decorated by previous work. Streaks of ochre, a dark blue, something that might once have been red. She is looking at her canvas and then looking away, out of the window, at something in the middle distance that isn't really a view, just a point she needs to look at that isn't the work, and then looking back at the canvas. Every artist has this rhythm. The looking away is as much a part of the work as the looking at. You cannot see the painting from here, of course. The canvas faces away from you, toward the light, but you can see her face when she looks at it, and her face is doing something interesting. A rapid sequence of evaluation, doubt, tentative satisfaction, renewed doubt. The whole drama of creative judgment played out in micro-expressions across a span of 4 or 5 seconds. Then she picks up her brush and makes a mark that you cannot see and looks at it, and something in her face settles. Not satisfaction exactly, acceptance maybe. The particular acceptance of someone who has made the mark that was inevitable, the one that was always going to be there, and has finally let it be. You stand on the pavement and watch for a moment longer than you probably should, but she doesn't look down. She is somewhere else now, fully in the painting, that absorbed elsewhere place. The creative work occasionally opens up where the body continues, but the self is somewhere more interior, more quiet, more entirely given over to the thing being made. You move on, but you carry the image with you. The woman in the window, the smock painted with the residue of previous work, the brush going to the canvas with the simple confidence of someone who has decided something. You think, not for the first time today, that Paris is full of people living their creative lives with a kind of everyday seriousness that is neither precious nor self-conscious, simply serious in the way that a craft becomes when you give it enough years. You find this enormously encouraging. You're not sure why, but you do. The light is changing. It happens gradually, and then all at once, the way most things happen in Paris, which is to say, with style and a certain inevitability. The amber has deepened to something richer, something closer to the color of old cognac, and the shadows have lengthened until they reach halfway across the streets. Windows are beginning to show light. Not many yet, just here and there, the early ones, the top floors where the light goes first. A warm square of yellow against the cooling gray of the building's face. Someone has lit a lamp in the room above the cobbler's shop. The café you passed earlier, Le Renard Gris, has its interior lights on now, and from outside, the fogged windows glow with a warmth that seems almost geographical. A warm country contained within its walls. The market, when you pass it again, is in its final stages. Most of the stalls have packed or are packing. The cheese covered, the fruit gone into crates, the vegetable seller loading his cart with unhurried efficiency. What remains of the afternoon crowd has dispersed. The street is wider now, paradoxically, the absence of the stalls making you aware of how much space they usually occupy, how they transform a street into a village square and back again each day. A woman is sweeping the stretch of cobblestone in front of where her stall stood, returning it to the city, erasing the day. By morning, all of this will be here again. The stalls will return, the sellers will return, the bread smells, and the cheese smells, and the voices, and the small dramas of daily commerce. The market will happen again, because it always happens again, because cities renew themselves in this patient daily way, because people need bread and cheese and fruit, and the particular experience of buying these things from other people in a public place, face to face, with money changing hands and a nod and sometimes a word. This has been happening on this street for centuries. It will happen again tomorrow. You find a bench at the edge of a small square you haven't noticed before. Paris is full of these small squares, pockets of pause between the streets, and you sit. A fountain in the center runs with a thin stream of water. 3 pigeons patrol the perimeter with the focused indifference of professionals. A plane tree at the corner of the square has lost most of its leaves, and what remains clings with a kind of dignified persistence. The light is truly golden now. Everything it touches, the stone of the buildings, the water in the fountain, the faces of the two children crossing the square with their mother, everything has taken on this quality of being slightly more than itself, slightly more beautiful than ordinary daylight permits, as though Paris has borrowed a last hour of summer and is spending it carefully, knowing it will have to be returned. There is a particular quality to certain afternoons. You've probably known them in your own life, in your own city, in whatever your own equivalent of this October Parisian light might be, where time seems to thicken, to move more slowly, to become almost tangible. This is one of those afternoons. You had spent it doing nothing of consequence. You have bought no paintings, attended no salons, met no one famous, witnessed no history in the official sense. You have walked through a market and sat in a café and watched a painter and listened to a conversation that wasn't yours, and eaten half a baguette on a street corner. You have paid attention. That is all. And it is, and you feel this clearly, sitting on your bench in your small square, as the light goes amber and the pigeons continue their professional patrol, and the city arranges itself for evening. It is, actually, enough, more than enough. It is the whole thing, the whole reason to be anywhere. 1920s. Paris is often spoken of in a particular way, as a golden age, a magical decade, the years when everything was possible and the city was alive with art and thought, and the peculiar electricity that comes when a critical mass of brilliant, restless people end up in the same place at the same time. And there is truth in that. The painters are here, the writers are here, the musicians and the philosophers, and the expatriates, and the radicals, and the people who simply arrived, because Paris was where the century felt most alive. All of that is happening somewhere in this city as you sit on your bench. But what you have found today is something else. You have found the city behind the mythology, the ordinary, enduring, deeply human city that was here before the Golden Age and will be here after it. The city of markets and cheese sellers and old men with newspapers and painters in smocked aprons, and two women talking beside a fabric stall, in the particular sound of church bells carried on October air. This city, this everyday city, is the one that matters most. It is the one that lasts. And now the lamps, the lamplighters of Paris, the allumeurs de réverbère, are men who have made themselves nearly invisible through the regularity of their work. They move through the streets at the same time each evening, with their long poles, lighting the gas lamps one by one, with a patience that borders on ceremony. You watch one cross the square now. He is a middle-aged man in a dark coat, moving at a walk that is neither fast nor slow, but simply efficient. The walk of someone who has done this route so many times that his body knows it and his mind is free to be elsewhere. He reaches the lamp at the corner of the square. He raises his pole. The flame catches. The lamp blooms into gold. He moves on. The lamp stays lit, and something about the square changes. Not dramatically, not completely, but in the way that things change when light appears in darkness, when warmth comes from a specific source, when a space that was anonymous becomes, for the duration of its illumination, a particular place. More windows now, more light from inside. The golden light of apartments and rooms, of people returning to their homes, of kitchens beginning to smell of garlic and butter in the dinner that has been considered all day and is now finally being made. You can hear, from an open window somewhere above, the sounds of a family, a chair scraping, a word called from one room to another, the particular acoustic of a domestic interior at the end of the working day. Paris in the evening is a warmer city than Paris in the afternoon. The hard daytime angles soften. The stone takes on the color of the lamplight. The streets, which were business and market and traffic, become something more intimate. The streets of people returning, resting, sitting down to eat with the people they share their lives with. The cafe life is beginning too. Different from the afternoon cafe, less solitary, more social. Through the lit windows, you can see tables filling, people leaning toward each other, the whole ritual of French evening conversation, beginning with its particular ceremony of order and counter-order, and the eventual arrival of something to drink, and the long, pleasurable, entirely unhurried business of talking to people you like about things that matter to you. You could stay. You could find a seat in one of these cafes and have another coffee or a glass of wine, or simply sit and watch the evening assemble itself around you. Paris at night is its own world, its own story, its own particular quality of being alive. But that is a story for another afternoon. It is time, not because anything has ended. Nothing has ended. The city goes on, will go on all night in its own way. The conversations and the lamps and the markets being prepared for tomorrow, and the Seine moving through the dark with its patient, indifferent grace. But you are beginning to feel the gentle pull of return, the way a dream begins to thin at the edges when morning is close. Not yet, not fully, but you can sense the membrane between here and there, growing thinner, translucent, the world behind it becoming visible. Before you go, though, before the city recedes, take one more moment, look up, the sky above Paris, above the rooftops, above the chimneys, with their thin threads of smoke, above the topmost windows where light is still showing. The sky is doing what the Paris sky does at the end of an October day. It has gone from blue to pale gold to a kind of mauve gray that is almost lavender, and at the horizon, there, where the city meets the sky in a ragged line of rooftops and church towers, there is a band of color that has no good name, something between rose and amber, and the particular color of old photographs, the color that things take on when they are in the process of becoming memory. The first star will be out soon. Not yet, but soon. You have been in Paris. You have breathed its October air, and drunk its coffee, and walked its cobbled streets, and watched its people live their ordinary, irreplaceable lives. You have heard the church bells of Saint-Médard count out the afternoon. You have stood in the market at the beginning of the day's second half and been surrounded by the color and smell and sound of a city feeding itself, sustaining itself, doing what cities have done since there were cities. You have paid attention, and in doing so, you have been here, fully here, in a city that no longer exists, in an afternoon that ended 100 years ago, in a world that was ordinary and extraordinary in equal measure, the way all worlds are, if you take the time to look. The city is still there as you go. The market street is quiet now, but it will wake again tomorrow. The cafe is lit from within, warm against the evening. Somewhere In the city, in a room you haven't seen, a woman is finishing a painting. Two friends are eating dinner and talking about the same things they've talked about for 30 years. A boy is finally letting his small sailboat rest at the edge of the Luxembourg basin while the last of the light goes from the water. Maurice, the cheese seller, is walking home. He is thinking about nothing in particular. He is simply walking through Paris in the evening after a good day's work. He is happy. He doesn't think of it in those terms. He would simply say that it is a fine evening, that his feet are tired, but his back is all right, that his wife will have made something good for dinner, that tomorrow he will return, and the cheese will be there, and the customers will come, and the day will be what it is. This is, when you think about it, the whole thing. Go gently. Carry Paris with you, a little, in the way that you carry places that have received you well. Not as nostalgia. That would be too thin for it. But as a quality of attention, a willingness to look, a patience with the ordinary that knows the ordinary is where everything actually lives. The world is full of October afternoons, full of markets and cafes, and people walking home, and lamps coming on in windows, and skies going from gold to something unnamed. Pay attention to yours. This has been Softer Worlds. Thank you for spending your afternoon in Paris. We'll go somewhere else together soon.